Hi, my name's Leo and I'm a boat builder and a sailor. Over the last few years, with a lot of help, I've rebuilt the wooden sailing boat Tally-Ho, and the mission now is to try and sail that boat from the Pacific back to the UK to compete once again in the Fastnet race in 2027, 100 years after she won it. Right now I'm in Tasmania visiting the Australian Wooden Boat Festival, but just a week ago in British Columbia I sailed Tally-Ho single-handed for the first time, and in this video we're going to look at some of the footage from that day and I'm going to talk a bit about what it took to sail the boat alone. And I started this short journey in James Bay, which is a small bay on Prevost Island in the southern Gulf Islands. So at this point Tally-Ho was still anchored, and this line that I'm taking off here is the brake line for the capstan. So I take that off before pulling the anchor up. And here I'm engaging the gear for the motor so I don't have to wind it up by hand. So I'm spraying the chain as it comes in with salt water from the deck wash hose, and I'm just doing that to reduce the amount of mud that comes up with the chain onto the deck and into the chain locker. So before I hauled the anchor all the way in, I started the engine and made sure I had a radio on deck. It's a good idea to monitor channel 16 at all times. It's the distress and calling channel. So here comes the anchor. It stows pretty easily in the bow roller. I use a Rockner Vulcan anchor, which is one of the new generation of anchors which are very good holding to weight ratio. I also have a fisherman anchor stowed on deck, which is actually really useful for kedging off or anchoring in rock. It's just a different anchor with a different set of characteristics. It's always important to close switch covers, especially for winches, in case they get stepped on accidentally. Here I'm just removing the anchor watch alarm on the GPS, and I'm taking the weatherboard out. I normally keep it in over the winter to keep the heat in the boat, but because I'm on my own, I want to be able to run up and down the companionway ladder quickly if I need to. Just saying hi here to a few cormorants, I think they are, on this red buoy, or buoy if you're American. I know some people think a fire on a wooden boat is a bad idea, but I don't know, I've spent a lifetime with wood burners, feel pretty safe with them. I don't ever let this one really roar up too much because I don't want the deck to get too hot above it, so I just keep it ticking over most of the time. But it does add a lot of warmth. It's a really nice comfort in the Canadian winter. Here I'm just easing the topping lifts a little bit. The topping lifts are lines that hold the boom up, and I keep the boom fairly high when I'm not sailing so that I don't hit my head on it so much. But when I'm sailing, I want the topping lifts eased out so that the boom is hanging from the sail, not the topping lifts. And that way the sail will be its proper shape. Okay, well I'm about to try and sail completely single-handed for the first time. Got all set up, prepared, but I wasn't sure if I was actually going to go ahead with it. But conditions look great and got nice open bit of water here. And if not now, then when? So I'm going to start by trying to hoist the main, and we'll see how that goes. So a gaff sail is usually hoisted with two halyards, the peak halyard and the throat halyard, one at each end of the gaff. And here I've been hoisting the main using both halyards at the same time, and I was able to hoist about 3/4 of the sail like that until it became too heavy for me. So then I tied off the peak halyard and just continued with the throat halyard alone until the forward end of the gaff was all the way hoisted, and then I switched over and just hauled on the peak end on its own.
Oh, that was hard. You can get fit like that every day.
So now I'm hauling on the peak and throat jiggers. These are an extra block and tackle on the other end of the halyard. So when pulling on these, you get extra purchase to get that last little bit of tension in the halyard. A halyard, I suppose I should mention, is any line that hoists a sail.
Head saws. Stakes are ready. Stakes are ready.
So I'd previously tied the jib up with this sort of lacing line that made it nice and quick and easy to untie the whole jib from the deck. Here I'm laying out the downhaul because that needs to run free to let the jib up, so I'm just making sure it's free to run and got no knots in it. And hoisting the jib, I did leave one sail tie in it, and the point of that sail tie is to stop the jib from falling in the water, so I just hoist it part way and then I can pull that sail tie off from deck when it's high enough not to fall in the water and get the last bit of the hoist. So up until this point the boat has been pointed more or less into the wind and moving ahead under diesel propulsion, and so every now and then I've been going back to the cockpit and adjusting the tiller to make sure it's still head to wind. But now I've got both the jib and the mainsail up, the boat will balance, so I'm steering away from the wind just a little bit to let the sails fill and bringing the throttle back to neutral on the engine.
Let's get the sail up.
So now I'm hoisting the staysail, and again the boat isn't under any sort of autopilot here, it's just steering itself. Because it's quite a heavy boat, it doesn't blow off the wind and change direction too quickly, which is useful in this sort of situation. And now the staysail's pretty much up, I'm just sweating the last bit of tension, and that basically just means leaning back with my body weight against the line to get a little more tension, and then pulling it through, up, around the belaying pin and tying it off. Now the staysail is hoisted, I'm heading back to the cockpit to adjust the staysail sheet. A sheet is any line which controls the trim of a sail, making it more or less full depending on the wind direction. And so I'm hauling in the staysail sheet, and now I'm easing out the main sheet to balance the boat a bit better. Now that the working sails are up, I'm bearing away. That means steering away from the wind to port in this case, so that the sails can fill and the boat can actually pick up some speed.
Oh, sailing. Chart.
For navigation, the main chart plotter is down below on the nav PC on the big screen, and the software I'm using is called Time Zero, and I've actually got a Time Zero repeater on my phone, so although I'm looking at my phone, it's actually using the boat's GPS, and it's also getting AIS information and depth and wind information, so that's pretty useful. Now I do hope to do a lot more traditional navigation in the future, and I have started doing some of that already, but for this sail, since I'm single-handed, I'm pretty happy to just rely on the GPS as well as obviously keeping a good look around me. So you may have noticed I just switched the engine off a moment ago, and so Tally-Ho is definitely sailing now, and the next job is to just adjust all the sheets, make sure we're on a good course, and then tidy up all the halyards and other lines that got pretty messy when I was hoisting all that sail. First though, I'm just running down below quickly because the boat is starting to heel over more, and I can hear things falling out of lockers because I didn't do a very thorough stow down below before I started sailing. Now you may notice a faint mechanical humming in the background from the cockpit. Now that's the water maker, which has been running a few hours. It's desalinating seawater into fresh drinking water, and I'm about to go into the engine room to turn it off. So we've got the main up and the staysail and the jib, and some beautiful conditions. Just got about 12-13 knots of wind, heading upwind into it, and as you can imagine, it feels pretty amazing and kind of scary to be single-handing this boat right now in wind for the first time, but feeling really stoked, really happy. And I'm just sitting on the high rail here. I got a rope around the tiller, which is quite a nice position when going to windward, so I get a bit of purchase on the tiller, so it's pretty easy to move, and got a good view, and it's actually pretty comfortable. So yeah, got a couple of ferries to avoid up ahead, and yeah, very stoked, very happy. Now it's time to tack the boat, so this will be another first for me, tacking single-handed. We'll see how it goes. Okay, tacking. So tacking the boat went well, and now we're cruising along very nicely at about 6 knots. If we had more people on board, and certainly if we were racing, we'd put more sail up, but this is just fine, making good progress. And the boat is pretty much steering herself. I've got the line on the tiller, just have to adjust it every now and then, but there's no autopilot or anything like that. And as everything seems pretty settled, time for a cup of tea and a biscuit.
All stations, this is Victoria Coast Guard Radio. Victoria Coast Guard Radio. The station has received an EPIRB alert from the fishing vessel North Provider for organic ride.
After a very pleasant sail from Prevost Island down to Portland Island, a distance of around 12 miles, I was happy to find very calm conditions in the lee of Portland Island, which would be perfect for dropping the sails on my own for the first time. I started with the headsails, which came down pretty easily, went out on the bowsprit just to tie up the jib, and then I worked on getting the main down. Getting the main down and felled tidally was a bit more challenging, but in these conditions it was actually pretty easy. The only real issue I had was a bit of a tangle in one of the main halyards because I hadn't flaked it out on deck properly, That was definitely a mistake and I should know better, but luckily because the conditions were so calm, I had plenty of time to untangle it. Hopefully I'll learn from that and make sure to flake out the halyard properly next time. But for a first single-handed sail, that being the only slight issue, I think was pretty good going. Once all the sails were down, I started the engine for the short trip into the anchorage. I could have done this under electric propulsion, but I actually needed to charge the batteries anyway. Royal Cove is a really lovely, quiet and protected anchorage, so after I got the hook down and got everything tidied away on deck, I had a beer, made dinner and had a good sleep. So I had a nice peaceful night anchored here at Portland Island and was just reflecting on how fun and exciting and a little bit scary of course it was to single-hand this boat for the first time. Really glad I got a chance to do it in good conditions, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more of that to come. Everything went pretty well. I was definitely thinking of little tweaks I could make as I was sailing to make it a little bit easier, so it'll be fun to try and implement those. But for now, thanks a lot for watching, and a massive thank you to everyone who has donated or otherwise supported this project. It does make a huge difference. It means I'm able to carry on sailing and maintaining this boat and making these videos. So I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.